Amon Hatshepsut is an Egyptian ruling queen ancient, the fifth in the line of kings of the dynasty 810, ruled after the death of her husband, King Thutmose II, as a regent for the young King Thutmose III in the beginning, and then as a queen and daughter of the god Amun after she published a story that she inscribed in her temple in the monastery. El-Bahari says in it that it was the result of an intimate meeting between Amun and her mother, Queen Ahmose, and Manetho confuses the arrangement and places it after Amenhotep I in the middle of the 18th dynasty. Amon Hatshepsut, better known as Hatshepsut, the most famous and most influential of the queens who ruled Egypt. Her rule was a prominent point not only in the history of the 18th dynasty, but in the entire history of ancient Egypt. Hatshepsut is the fifth king of the dynasty 810 ancient Egyptians. Egyptologists consider her one of the most successful ancient Egyptian kings. Her name means, the concubine of Amun, the favorite of the ladies, or the concubine of Amun, the daughter of the princesses. Her birthday and family. Hatshepsut was born in 1508 BC, the eldest daughter of King Thutmose I, and the queen, Ahmose. The king, Ahmose I, the owner of the great victory in liberating Egypt from the Hyksos, is the great-grandfather of Hatshepsut, and the founder of the family 810, the pharaohs to which it belongs. Hatshepsut was the legal heir to the throne of the country, as there was no legitimate male heir, but she had a half-brother from her father, Thutmose II, from a secondary wife named Mutnefert. Teach her. Hatshepsut was educated in the sciences of ethics and correct behavior, in addition to reading and writing, arithmetic, philosophy, religious rituals, grammar and composition. Egyptian sages the ancients, like any of her fellows, like her half-brother, Thutmose II, little princes and princesses, and a number of sons of ministers and noble families, there is no doubt that she feared the teacher who was teaching her lessons, and feared his violent methods with his students, regardless of their status. Hatshepsut could claim any special privileges in her treatment, and the royal school in the house of Pharaoh was like other schools in the country, starting in the early morning and ending at noon, as many schools in Egypt do at the present time. Her marriage. Hatshepsut married her half-brother, Thutmose II, according to the custom of the pharaohs, who had no choice but to marry Hatshepsut, and she bore him a son and two daughters, Ra, and Merit Ra Hatshepsut. He gave birth to her husband, Thutmose II, his son, Thutmose III, from one of the concubines of the royal court, who was called Isa. Take over. The road was not paved for Hatshepsut and was paved with roses to reach power. She faced with all determination and stubbornness a patriarchal religious society and authority, which refused to see the ruler except in the form of a man. Hatshepsut began a difficult time in her life at the age of 20, upon the death of her father, Thutmose I. She was previously a co-regent with her father, and the legitimate heir to the throne, so it was conceivable that she was the next pharaoh of Thutmose I on the throne. However, court traditions and priests' intrigues began to interfere because the idea of a woman ruling and putting all power in her hands was not their liking. For this reason it was inevitable that her half-brother, Thutmose II, ruling, that person is skinny and in poor health, with little experience in managing the affairs of the country, and to be a partner with her in the king as the pharaoh of the country, while she becomes a royal wife and nothing more than this. There was no benefit in protesting, as all circumstances were against her, and they began to prepare for her marriage to Thutmose II, and thus Thutmose II obtained the legitimacy of the rule, and we know little about his short period of rule, except for a revolution that took place in the south. But, instead of leading the army himself and marching to the enemies as his father did, he instructed his soldiers to be cruel to the most extreme degree of outlaws. Thutmose was the second person was a weak person and may have been ill at the same time. In fact, Hatshepsut was the one who ran the affairs of the state, and ruled the country in his name from behind a curtain. What will happen when he dies? There was no other prince who could succeed him on the throne, as if she would at last rule the country alone, while her friends, who knew her power and strength, were pleased with the idea, and were more than willing to serve her faithfully when the time came. However, her husband, Thutmose II, he wanted to give his son, Thutmose III, the right to take the throne after him, and there was a person plotting with the Temple of Amun in Karnak, raising the general feeling among the priests and the people against the idea of a woman ruling them, and this person was Thutmose III himself, who was living in the temple as one of his priests. Thutmose II died in 1501 BC, and on one day shortly after his death, when Hatshepsut was in the temple to witness a celebration in which the procession of the god Amon would go out, the palanquin that was carrying the statue, Amon, stood in front of a small priest, and refused to budge after that, and all those present agreed that what had happened was only a sign that Amon had chosen him to share the judgment with her. Amon was Thutmose III, the son of her deceased husband. On the third day of May 1501 BC, Thutmose left his work as one of the young priests in the Temple of Amun, to enter the royal palace of the pharaohs, and Hatshepsut was 34 years old at that time, and since the first day, competition and bitterness prevailed among them, and Hatshepsut only took it turned supporters and formed a supportive party, and this party took a short time until its influence intensified, and it became so powerful that the pharaoh, who did not have enough experience, became completely incapable of ruling the country, and was forced to vacate the place to Hatshepsut. Finally, in 1478 BC, Hatshepsut was declared king of Upper Egypt and the Delta, and ruled Egypt and its possessions abroad alone as a pharaoh. In the songs of praise that she sang in praise, they called her the female Horus, and they added the feminine sign at the end of the word that denotes majesty. The royal khans in which Hatshepsut's name was written, and which appear on the walls of Deir el-Bahari and Karnak and in other places in Egypt, were clear in their meanings, as it was added next to her name, King of Upper Egypt and the Delta, daughter of the sun, friend of Amon Hatshepsut, golden Horus, giver of years, goddess of radiance, conqueror of all lands, who revives hearts, strong lady. And this moment was the moment of victory for her, and the ancient Egyptian historian, Manethau, estimated her reign of 21 years and 9 months. The question may arise here, what did Hatshepsut do to Thutmose III, after she overthrew him? And some might think that she killed him or exiled him to a place far from Egypt. However, the truth is that she entrusted the education and training of this pharaoh, who was before that a young priest in military education, and taught him the art of state administration, to lead some military campaigns against the revolutionaries against the Egyptian rule outside the country at the end of her rule, and he took over the rule after her death, after his marriage to her daughter, Mrit-Ra Hatshepsut, which gave him the legitimacy of rule, and he was one of the most powerful warrior pharaohs who ruled Egypt, and was the first and most powerful Egyptian empire in history. Her work during her reign. The period of Hatshepsut's rule was characterized by peace and prosperity, and her reign was marked by the strength of the army, construction activity, and the great sea voyages that she sent to trade with neighboring countries. Sinai Island, as work in those mines, had stopped during the Hyksos rule of Egypt and beyond, and we still find in Sinai a plaque with writing documenting this work and glorifying what it did. Hatshepsut also activated the trade movement with Egypt's neighbors, where trade was in a bad state, especially during the reign of King Thutmose II, and reused a canal linking the Nile at the end of the delta to the Red Sea, as it cleaned this canal after the Egyptians dug it in the days of the Middle Kingdom, in order to run Egypt's naval fleet with it to go out to the Gulf of Suez and then to the waters of the Red Sea. She ordered the construction of several facilities in the Karnak temple, and also built her temple in Deir el-Bahari and Luxor. Hatshepsut was interested in the Egyptian merchant fleet, so she built large ships, and used them in internal transportation to transport the obelisks that she ordered to be added to the Karnak temple in glorification of the god Amun, and in trade exchange missions with its neighbors. Among the most important are incense, perfumes, spices, plants, tropical trees, predators, and leather. Atlantic expedition. Queen Hatshepsut sent a large fleet to the ocean, the Atlantic, and trade flourished with the Atlantic Ocean to import some types of rare fish. Country mission Punt. Queen Hatshepsut sent a trade mission aboard large ships navigating the Red Sea, loaded with Egyptian gifts and goods such as papyrus and linen to the country. Punt, present-day Somalia, and southern Yemen. The king of Punt received the mission well, and then returned loaded with large quantities of predatory animals, wood, incense, ebony, ivory, leather and precious stones. Queen Hatshepsut portrayed the news of that mission on the walls of the Deir el-Bahari temple on the western bank of the Nile at Luxor, and the colors that adorn the drawings of this temple are still bright and retain their splendor and beauty to a large extent. The Aswan Mission, also depicted on the walls of the Deir el-Bahari temple, a description of the mission of Hatshepsut to the granite quarries at Aswan to bring the huge stones for the installations, and it established 2 great granite obelisks in Aswan in glorification of the god Amun, each of them amounting to about 35 tons. Then they were transferred on the Nile to Thebes, and the 2 obelisks were taken their places in the Karnak temple in Luxor. When Napoleon visited during the French campaign against Egypt in 1879, he ordered the transfer of one of the 2 obelisks to France, and it still adorns the Place de la Concorde in the French capital, Paris. Historians and engineers to this day admire the ability of the Egyptians to transfer these 2 obelisks from Aswan to Luxor. The chosen place for them is exactly in front of the edifice built by Queen Hatshepsut, with the Temple Karnak as a few meters from the edifice, and engineers are still developing theories for the way the ancient Egyptian engineer used to do this mighty work. Not only that, Hatshepsut issued orders to build an obelisk that is considered the largest obelisk in human history, consisting of a single piece of stone weighing above 1,000 tons to be placed in Karnak temple. But the ancient Egyptian engineers left it after they discovered a crack in it that prevented its use. Tourists from all over the world are currently visiting to witness the wonder of that incompletely equipped obelisk in the Aswan quarry, and they ask themselves, how did the ancient Egyptians want to transfer this giant obelisk to the Karnak temple? One of the German Egyptologists describes the methods of cutting the stone that the ancient Egyptians used to deal with the stone as if it were butter, and in fact, this can be seen in the Aswan quarry, and it is now called the obelisk. Deficient. Military campaigns. The prevailing in the era of Hatshepsut is peace, prosperity of trade with neighboring countries, which were not inclined to the policy of foreign invasion. However, a few military campaigns were recorded during her reign, most of which came as disciplinary campaigns, in addition to one military campaign recorded during the reign of Hatshepsut carried out by Thutmose. The third was the capture of Gaza, which was near the end of its rule. Some manuscripts, such as one found in the cemetery of Senmut, TT 71, reveal disciplinary campaigns in Nubia and some other countries that were under Egyptian rule, as follows. 1. A disciplinary campaign against Nubia at the beginning of its rule was carried out by Hatshepsut. This is mentioned in the manuscript of the head of the treasury. A disciplinary campaign against Syria and Palestine, according to a manuscript in Deir el-Bahari, to which was added a campaign against a rebellion in Nubia. 3. Campaign against a rebellion in Nubia in the 20th year of her reign, written on the Thutmose tablet. 4. A punitive campaign against a mound near the area of the Furqa squad between the 20th and 22nd years of her reign. The secret of the appearance of Hatshepsut in the clothes of the male pharaohs. Hatshepsut did not want to innovate in the appearance of the ruling pharaoh, which people have familiarized with for decades. Although at the beginning of her reign she was depicted as a woman in full adornment, but later on she became an example of the strong, muscular pharaoh, who wears a false beard. She started wearing clothes resembling the clothes of the male pharaohs who preceded her in official ceremonies, and she appeared in some of her statues with a borrowed chin, as is customary in the statues of the pharaohs. Although this did not diminish the fact that Hatshepsut had all the qualities of a beautiful female, she had a pleasant burgundy complexion, a slightly hooked nose, and a round face, and she loved flowers, and gardens, and trees, and everything that was fragrant, colorful. Was there a love story between the queen and the engineer Senmut? We Will Die was an exciting mystery in the life of Hatshepsut, the engineer who built her famous temple in the monastery. el-Bahari, who gave him 80 titles, and who was responsible for raising and educating her daughter, the little princess, Nefru, Ra, and it reached out of his love for his queen that he dug a tunnel between her tomb and his tomb, to be close to her in the next life, as he was close to her in this world. As for her, she appreciated his genius and the strength of his personality, to the extent that she allowed him to build his tomb on the precincts of her temple to be adjacent to it in his death, as he used to do in this world. And if the historian's hints indicate that there is a love case between the two of them, We Will Die and Hatshepsut, after the death of her husband. But, this is not a certainty, and it may just be a relationship of mutual respect. And the royal engineer, Senmut, was the one who built Hatshepsut, the most beautiful funerary temple built for a queen in history, whether ancient or modern, which is the Deir el-Bahari temple, which he built in the bosom of the western mountain, and it was built with royal white limestone brought from Turan, and in the form of 3 halls one above the other, in order to the queen's spirit ascends her to the sky to be immortal with the stars. Her death. Hatshepsut died on the 10th of the second month of the autumn season, which corresponds to January 14, 1457 BC, during the 22nd year of her reign, as stated in a writing on a tablet found in Armand. The mummy of Hatshepsut was verified, that the signs of her death are signs of a natural death, and that the cause of her death was due to cancer or diabetes. Hatshepsut's tomb is located in the Valley of the Kings and is symbolized by the number KV20. Perhaps Hatshepsut expanded her father's tomb to be used, and her coffin was found next to her father's sarcophagus. Recently, a picture of the mummy of Queen Hatshepsut appears in a dreamy and meek smile, as if he fulfilled his mission to the fullest, and finally rested. And the funny thing in the picture is that the queen had beautiful soft-colored hair. It appears clearly in the picture as well, and this indicates that the science of mummification that the ancient Egyptians created was a great secret if discovered. It may change the appearance of burial in the entire world. Whatever the matter of Queen Hatshepsut, she is one of the few women in the ancient world who reached the top of the administration in their country. Whether you did not convince them, what you did was much greater than what some of the men kings did. Hatshepsut, meaning, one of the most prominent noble ladies 1508-1458 BC, was the fifth pharaoh of the dynasty era 810 in Egypt Old. Egyptologists consider her one of the most successful pharaohs, holding the title longer than any other woman in Egyptian dynasties. Her reign was marked by the strength of the army, the activity of construction, and the great sea voyages that she sent to trade with neighboring countries. She is the eldest daughter of the pharaoh of Egypt, King Thutmose I, and her mother Queen Ahmose. Her father, the king, had given birth to an illegitimate son, Thutmose II. She agreed to marry him according to the custom of royal families, so that they would jointly participate in the ruling after his death, and that was a solution to the problem of having a legitimate heir to him. Her family. This queen left many mysteries and secrets, and perhaps the most exciting of these puzzles is the character of We Will Die, the engineer who built her famous temple in the monastery. Bahari, which gave him 80 titles. He was responsible for taking care of her only daughter, and he was so in love with his queen that he dug a tunnel between her tomb and his. And if the historian's hints indicate the existence of a state of love that united the two Senmut and Hatshepsut, then the queen and her servant also participated in a legendary life, and each ended in a mysterious end that is still a mystery until now. Hatshepsut was the wife of King Thutmose II, about 1512 BC to 1504 BC, of the 18th dynasty, and it seems that her husband was overthrown for a few years, but they returned to the throne in 1493 BC. And for the next 12 years she devoted all her strength and the resources of Egypt to the construction of roads, and the construction of houses and temples, and to improve the conditions of the interior countries, and to try to keep Egypt away from war with its neighbors. And one of her greatest works is a shrine to her husband in Wadi the Kings, near Thebes, were also patrons of artists and craftsmen. Her rule. Hatshepsut's rule was famous for its peace and prosperity, as it was trying its utmost to develop relations, especially trade, with the countries of the ancient East to prevent any wars with them. Takeover. Jizru is the main building in the temple, the funerary complex of Hatshepsut in the monastery Marine. Designed by Senmut, as an example of perfect symmetry that predates the Parthenon by 1,000 years. Hatshepsut faced many problems at the beginning of her rule because she ruled from behind the curtain without an official form, and some people say that she killed her husband and her brother, King Thutmose II, to seize the rule, but there is not enough evidence. On the other hand, she faced problems with the people, as most people saw that she was a woman and could not rule the country, as the king was, according to custom, a representative of the god Horus, the ruler on earth. Therefore, she was always dressed and adorned with men's clothes, and it was rumored that she was the daughter of Amon to convince the people that she could rule. At the same time, he was the legitimate crown prince of Thutmose III, is still a boy and is not able to take care of the country's interests. Hatshepsut worked to rule the country until he grew up, and took care that Thutmose was brought up the third as a military education so that he can take the reins of government later. Hatshepsut stimulated the trade movement with Egypt's neighbors, where trade was in a bad state, especially during the reign of King Thutmose II, and ordered the construction of several facilities in the Temple of Karnak, as well as her temple in the monastery Bahari in Luxor, and her reign was marked by peace and luxury. Missions to neighboring countries. Hatshepsut was interested in the Egyptian merchant fleet, so she built large ships and used them in internal transport to transport the obelisks that she ordered to add to the Temple Karnak, glorified the god Amun, or sent ships on missions to exchange trade with its neighbors, and its reign was characterized by prosperity and peace in Egypt, and increased demand for entertainment items brought by merchant fleets from neighboring countries, the most important of which is incense and perfume and spices and plants, tropical trees, predators and leather. Atlantic expedition. Queen Hatshepsut sent a large fleet to the Atlantic Ocean and trade with the Atlantic Ocean flourished to import some rare species of fish. Country mission Punt. Queen Hatshepsut sent a trading mission on ship Big, navigating in the sea. The Red was loaded with gifts and Egyptian goods such as papyrus and linen to the country of Punt, currently Somalia, so the king of Punt received the mission well, and then returned loaded with large quantities of animals, predatory and timber and incense and ebony, ivory, leather and stones precious. Queen Hatshepsut photographed the news of that mission on the walls of the monastery Temple Bahari on the west bank of the Nile at Luxor. The colors that adorn the paintings of this temple are still vivid and retain their splendor and beauty to a large extent. Aswan expedition. Also depicted on the walls of the Deir el-Bahari temple, is a description of Hatshepsut's expedition to the granite quarries at Aswan to bring the huge stones for the installations. And it established 2 great granite obelisks in Aswan in glorification of the god Amun, each of about 35 tons, and then they were transferred on the Nile to Thebes, and the 2 obelisks took their place in a temple. Karnak in shorter. When visiting Napoleon during the campaign, the French over Egypt in 1879 ordered the transfer of one of the 2 obelisks to France, and it still adorns a square concord in the French capital, Paris. Historians and engineers admire to this day the ability of the Egyptians to transfer these 2 obelisks from Aswan to Luxor. The process of loading the 2 obelisks on ships, then transporting them on the Nile, landing them on land, and then transporting them on land to their place of construction is not easy at all. What is also more than that is the construction of the 2 obelisks in the exact location chosen for them in front of the edifice that Queen Hatshepsut built in a Temple Karnak is a few meters from the edifice. Engineers are still developing theories for the way the ancient Egyptian engineer used to do this mighty work. Not only that, Hatshepsut issued orders to build an obelisk that is considered the largest obelisk in human history, consisting of a single piece of stone weighing more than 1,000 tons, to be placed in the Karnak temple, but the ancient Egyptian engineers left it after they discovered a crack that prevented its use. Tourists from all over the world are currently visiting to witness the miracle of that incompletely equipped obelisk in the Aswan quarry. And they ask themselves, how did the ancient Egyptians want to transfer this giant obelisk to the Karnak temple? One of the German Egyptologists describes the methods of cutting the stone that the ancient Egyptians used to deal with the stone as if it were butter, and in fact this can be seen in the Aswan quarry, and which is now called the incomplete obelisk. Hatshepsut in popular culture is one of the most famous queens who took over the rule of Egypt and is considered one of the beauties, and Hatshepsut is the first to wear gloves due to the presence of a congenital defect in her fingers, 6 or more fingers in one hand. People did not know this until after seeing her mummy. Her hands looked natural because she was instructing the sculptors to do so, and she was also the first to embroider gloves with precious stones. Military campaigns. One military campaign recorded during the reign of Hatshepsut, carried out by Thutmose III, was the capture of Gaza, which was near the end of its rule. Some manuscripts, such as one found in the tomb of Senmut, TT 71, reveal punitive campaigns in Nubia and some other countries that were under Egyptian rule. 1. A disciplinary campaign against Nubia at the beginning of its rule, carried out by Hatshepsut. This is stated in a manuscript by the head of the treasury, Tej. 2. A punitive campaign against Syria and Palestine, according to a manuscript in Deir el-Bahari, with a campaign against a rebellion in Nubia added to it. 3. A disciplinary campaign in the 12th year of her reign. This was mentioned in a letter in Tanger West, in which the first date of Thutmose's participation was mentioned. Third in power with Hatshepsut. 4. Campaign against a rebellion in Nubia in the 20th year of her reign, written on the Thutmose tablet. Her death. Hatshepsut died on the 10th of the second month of autumn, corresponding to January 14, 1457 BC, during the 22nd year of her reign. This came in writing to the panel found Barmut. The ancient Egyptian historian Manetho estimated her reign at 21 years and 9 months. It was believed in the past that she was killed due to a dispute over the ruling, but now it has been verified that the mummy of Hatshepsut clearly shows signs of natural death, and that the cause of her death was due to cancer or diabetes. Her tomb is located in the Valley Kings and symbolized by the number KV20. Perhaps Hatshepsut expanded her father's tomb to be used, and found her coffin next to her father's sarcophagus.